All right, so this video hopefully will kind of refresh on some of the things that we went over in person on how to plan a cross-country flight. But no matter what, I have a document on the Google Drive for cross-country flight planning, and it should be the most up-to-date one. So even if something on that document changes versus this video, the document's going to be more accurate than the video because it's hard to redo a video. It takes me a lot of time. All right, so things that we're going to need is a navigation log, a sectional, a plotter, and an E6B. So I have a link to a performance chart package and also the navigation log that I would use. I have a whole nother video on calculating performance charts. So I'm not going to ever show you how to calculate weight and balance or time, fuel, distance to climb in this video. That you can watch the video for that, or maybe you remember how to do that part out. So I have a bunch of useful website links up here at the top, and I generally link it at different points as well. So if I tell you to plan across country somewhere, really anytime before, we can do some steps, like, even 2 weeks in advance, we can do steps. But then some of the steps that are weather related and weather dependent, we have to wait until kind of right before the flight, maybe the morning of before the flight. All right, so the first thing we got to do is we're going to calculate takeoff weight and balance. So we would take the performance packet and we would calculate weight and balance. So that performance packet would be the performance chart for the associated plane. So maybe this performance chart right here. So we'd calculate our weight and balance. We'd figure out our takeoff weight and balance. Later on, we'd figure out our landing weight and balance. And we'd do all these performance chart calculations, and we kind of talk about when we would do those associated with them. So right now, we do our takeoff weight and balance. I just assume full fuel, and I weigh 155 pounds. We can then write our takeoff weight, and in our takeoff section. So let's say our takeoff weight was 2,100. Let's just say that works out there. So takeoff weight's 2,100. And we could write a check mark. I'm just going to write check because I can't do a check mark very easily with the software that I'm using to record the video with. I'm having to use my computer. So we do our weight, and our moment is inside our 4.5 CG. So we're good there. All right, next we're going to figure out, we're going to find our 2 points on our sectional chart, and we're going to try to write as much information as we can on that sectional chart. So I am using ForeFlight on the internet just to make this easier to video with. And so here is the sectional chart, and here's the sections for Tuscaloosa. So if I kind of just come up here and then zoom into Tuscaloosa, we will see the information that we can get off of Tuscaloosa, and we're going to write it. So it's going to go Tuscaloosa Regional Airport. Reading right here, Tuscaloosa Regional Airport. The identifier is TCL. So if we go to our documents, we're going to depart out of KTCL. The control tower is going to be 126.3. It's operational part-time, and it's also the CTAF. So we're going to write right here, we're going to go 126.3. 126.30 if we want to. The ASOS, can't really read behind whatever this is up, but it says 132.82 is the ASOS frequency. That is going to be the weather frequency. So we're going to write right there for weather. We're going to write 132. Let me delete these two things. This is my paper's easier, but it's hard to record. 132.82. So the 5 does not matter, and if you don't write it down, you won't confuse yourself in the cockpit because we can't put it in. I'm going to drop some of this chart layers off. All right, now we can read the whole entire sectional chart. All right, so that is the weather frequency. The next line, field elevation, is going to be 170. So we're going to write field elevation 170. So that's the field elevation for Tuscaloosa. Pattern altitude, we know that information as well for Tuscaloosa. And it's going to go 1,200. We could write any other information that we kind of just know off the top of our head at this point, or we can just wait until we get that information later on. So that's for Tuscaloosa. And so if we go down here, I'm going to find Selma. So I'm just kind of going down. I'm going to try to put it in a similar spot so I can still see my thing. All right, so there's Selma. I'm going to pull up our nav log. So again, Craig Field, Selma. And so our destination, we're going to go CM. And our AY, which is weather, is 119.15. So we're going to go 119.15. Next line is field elevation 166. 166. Lighted, pilot control lighting, 8,000 feet is the longest runway. 122.7 is the CTAF and the Unicom. So we're going to write that in both spots, and I just realized I forgot to do that for Tuscaloosa. So 122.7 is the Unicom, and then 122.7 is also the CTAF, we can zoom back up here so that you can see it. And so I think it's 122.95. Yep, 122.95 is going to be the unit for Tuscaloosa. 2.95. So we FBOs, maybe like Dixie here to call for fuel on that one. So we've got that. Our second step is out of the way. So next, we're going to look up notices to airmen. So we're going to see if there's any notices to airmen important to the flight and write them down on the back of our document, kind of in this section for our departure or our arrival, if we see any NOTAMs that are going to apply. So we can go to pilot.nas.faa.gov, or we could just Google like FAA NOTAMs, and this is the top Google result. We're going to use the search box under NOTAM retrieval, and we're going to pull multiple locations. We're going to pull for both Tuscaloosa and Selma by just putting a space between them. So if we go here, we're going to go pilot NAS. There's the website up there. I'm going to agree to it, and I'm going to put our code locations, KTCL space KSEM for Tuscaloosa and Selma. I'm going to hit View NOTAMs. So I'm going to see if I can zoom in. All right. So there's going to be a bunch of NOTAMs that aren't going to necessarily matter. So like this TOPS NOTAM, obstruction tower. This is obstruction tower. Obstruction tower. It's just all these obstruction towers lights are out of service. Now this one, Tuscaloosa Taxiway 4, Charlie 4 between Taxiway Charlie and West Ramp is closed. They're doing construction right now. That's why. Same thing on this Taxiway Edge lighting. Actually, that's a different one. It's just unserviceable. And then the West Ramp working in progress, lighted and barricaded. Some more tower lights are out of service. And then this is an instrument approach. So no NOTAMs that we wouldn't really know about if we've been around Tuscaloosa for a little bit, knowing that they're working on the West Ramp right now. Selma, remote communication outlet 122.4 is unserviceable. That'll actually be important later on. So that's something we can write down. So we can go, we're going to go to NOTAMs, and we're going to say RCO, which is what that is. It's going to be the remote communication outlet, unserviceable. So that's not going to work. Maybe we can try, and maybe it's going to work, and we'll see. And it looks like it's going to be unserviceable for the next couple of days until November 7th. Obstruction tower, obstruction tower, obstruction tower, obstruction tower. Selma runway 3 lighting system unserviceable. Navigation ILS runway 3 unserviceable. Automated broadcast system ceiling not available. Runway 15 and 33's closed. They're doing construction. That's going to keep on going on for the next couple of days until the 3rd of November. So if we got to this point on a cross country they were planning, we would stop at this point because there's not much point in planning the cross country to somewhere that's closed. That's why we're checking it so early on. But I'm going to continue planning it because I like it as a pretty good airport to plan to, and also it's only going to be closed for another 3 days. So let's see what the next step is. So there's no NOTAMs that are really that important, assuming that tower, that the whole entire airport being closed was not a NOTAM, and we put down the ones that we thought were appropriate. And next we're going to check for TFR, so temporary flight restrictions. We're going to see if there's any massive temporary flight restriction that's going to make it so that we can't make the flight. So these 2 steps we're doing right now, just to make sure that we don't waste any time. If it turns out that either of those make us quit planning our flight, we're better off doing it in the beginning. So we can use an FAA TFR site. We can use SkyVector or any other site. They'll show us TFRs. I'm not a big fan of the FAA site. My favorite way of looking at them is going to be on ForeFlight or on SkyVector. So I'll just show you on ForeFlight. So if we sit here and we zoom out, TFRs on both SkyVector and ForeFlight are going to kind of give you a yellow if they're going to be in the future, and they're just going to be red if there's not. I guess the president's coming. I think this is like Tupelo or something. Maybe it's not. And I guess he's coming. And so there is a flight restriction for that because that's about the only time they get that big is if a president's going to come visit. So there's no temporary flight restriction between Tuscaloosa and Selma. So we are good to continue making this flight. So we're good there. Now we're going to draw a straight between our 2 points and measure the distance. So you would pull out your sectional chart, you would pull out your spinning plotter, and you would draw a straight line between the two and measure the distance. We want to write the distance in the bottom right side of our navlog under the distance column and the total row. And we want to make sure we're using the sectional, not the WAC, and we're using nautical mile side, not the statute mile side. So nautical and sectional, and we'll write that distance. So we could measure that, and if you do that on your own, it's going to result in an answer of 61. I just can't do it without having one, and it's hard to record on paper. So we're going to do that, and we're going to scroll up here. And so distance column, total distance. It's not liking it. We're going to go 61, and then I'll just drag it where I want it. So total distance is going to be 61. And if we wanted to, we could go ahead and put as our first checkpoint KTCL. So we drew a straight line, we measured our distance, and now we need to calculate our true course and write it in. So if we had a spinning plotter, we would just do it parallel to the line that we drew, and then we'd make sure the spinning part is pointing directly north. We could use their lines latitude or longitude to make sure that it's pointed straight. I've got a link to a YouTube video on how exactly you can do it, but it's pretty straightforward. I think you get an answer. We're at least going to act like you get an answer of 150. I think it's at least very close. It might be like a 152. And so we wrote it under our true course, 150. So we could also do it with a non-spinning plotter or a physical E6. We have some other videos on it. Next, we're going to write our east and west variation. It's based on isogonic lines, which are the purple dashed lines in your sectionals, and it's the difference between true north and magnetic north. The closest to Tuscaloosa is going to be 3 west. The rule is east is least, west is best, so we subtract east and add west. But I do that for us. East is least, west is best, and I add that on there. So if we go back to ForeFlight, which is how I'm going to show it to you, and so if we zoom in on our sectional chart right here. So see this purple line right to the right of Tuscaloosa. That is that isogonic line as the map renders. So that is that isogonic line. If I we'll say it at the bottom of the sectional, but since these are two combined, it just forever. So there's that 3 west. And so that's where I'm getting that 3 degrees west for that isogonic line. So we're going to go plus 3. And so 3 for our east and west variation. Let's see what the next step is. Now we're going to look for a maximum elevation figure in each quadrant and find the highest obstacle along our route. We're really only concerned with obstacles within 5 nautical miles of each side of our course. And we want to make sure that we want to keep obstacles in mind whenever we're picking an altitude later on. And maybe we could write that down somewhere so we could remember it if I asked you that question. And in non-mountainous terrain, we want to give us kind of a 1,000-foot clearance as a good rule of thumb, and in non-mountainous terrain, 2,000 feet. So what I'm talking about on that MEF, so we'll kind of scroll up here to kind of start the scan. So each quadrant of latitude and longitude gives us a maximum elevation. In this quadrant for Tuscaloosa, the maximum elevation figure is 1,400. So I think it's going to be this 1256 number right here. So they kind of round it up and add 100 to it. So if they round this up to 1,300, add 100, there's that maximum elevation figure of 1,400. So coming out of Tuscaloosa, we could just kind of look on each side of course. It looks like we got a couple of obstacles kind of 500 feet tall. And then we do have this one obstacle kind of 1,300 feet tall. But considering we will be well above it by that point, that obstacle does not concern us because we'll have been, past 1,200 feet almost before we even turn out. We'll probably be right here along our course before we even get there. Looking at our next quadrant, 1,200. So we can even just look right through that one because we're going to be well above that altitude as we're passing through. And let's not do that. And we're just looking down, and then we kind of slowly pass this quadrant. It's 900 feet, no problem there. And then Selma is on this figure with 2,200 feet. My guess is it's going to be there, but we're inside this quadrant for so short, and we've just got a couple of 400, 300-foot obstacles. And so kind of as we start that descent, nothing concerning. It's all sub 500 feet. So we will be fine because we'll be well above that until we are in the traffic pattern for Selma. So no maximum elevation figures that are concerning for us. And so there's really no need to write it down because they're so high up. Picking an altitude that we wish to fly, and we're going to write that in. So the rule is northeast odd, southwest even. So the saying is knee odd Sweven, northeast odd, southwest even. And it only applies to above 300 feet above the ground, which is AGL. And it's based on magnetic course. So 017, we pick an odd altitude, and 0 to 179, we pick an odd altitude. 180 to 359, we pick an even altitude. Our course is a 150, so we're between 0 and 179. So we're going to pick an odd altitude. But we have to add 500 feet because we're flying VFR, visual flight rules. And so we could go at a course of 3,500, 5,500. Since we're flying a long way, let's say we're going to make this flight at 5,500 will be our altitude. And actually, I want to put that right there. It's really does not matter. I could write it up top, but I've started doing this thing where I write our takeoff altitude right there. So we're going to take off, and then by our first checkpoint, we'll kind of be at 5,500. The regulation on that is 91,159. You can click that link and you can figure that one out. To calculate our magnetic course, we take our true course and add our east and west variation. But considering 3 degrees west near Tuscaloosa, that is there isn't much point in doing this. So in this case, we would be 153 as as our magnetic course that we're using to pick our altitude, but we can act like magnetic course and true course are equal for most of these calculations. So now we can start writing down checkpoint information. So the first checkpoint we want to do is a top of climb checkpoint. So we're going to be climbing all the way through our first checkpoint, and at our first checkpoint, we're going to reach our altitude. And we're going to leave that blank because we'll have to calculate it depending on weather before our climb. So how I like to illustrate top of climb is I just put TOC, top of climb. Now, if we're planning this cross country, morning of, we could make top of climb and maybe we could associate that with a physical checkpoint. But I kind of prefer to have a top of climb done. And you could go ahead and do the top of climb. It's not going to really matter if you want to combine it. But in this example, I'm going to do them as two separate things, and I'll show you how we can deal with that if that's the case. Pick the rest of them kind of 10 to 20 miles apart. We want to circle them on a chart and write a text description of them on the nav log. We're going to pick things that we're able to see from the air, like the city's town, roads, power lines, pipelines, railroad tracks, and landmarks. And the best checkpoints have multiple ways to identify them, and it lets us make sure that it's the power line you think and it's not some other random one. And if we see a new symbol, if we ever look at our chart and we see a new symbol, we can look at it at the legend. So one of the front or back, whenever we close our sectional chart, it has a legend for us that breaks down a lot of it. Or we can look at a really big document put out by the FAA Aeronautical Chart User Guide. There's a link right there to it. And if you still can't figure it out, just make a note of it and ask me, and I should know it off the top of my head. And so whenever we're writing this stuff in the distance column, which is going to be right here, our distance column, we're going to write leg distance over distance remaining. So leg distance is our distance from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. So in this case, leg distance for this one will be Tuscaloosa to our top of climb point. And then our next leg will be top of climb to whatever our next checkpoint that we're going to call it. And then remaining distance is our total distance minus distance traveled. So, if it takes us 3 miles to get to our top of climb, then we have 58 miles remaining. So we do 3 right here and 58 right there. So, we'll leave our top of climb and let's go look for some checkpoints that we can use along the way. So going back to our sectional chart, we'll just start up where we're departing. And if we measure this out, I'm just going to kind of we're going to use this power line right here. And so this power line right here is 13 miles. I just know from my own knowledge. But what we'd want to do is we'd want to just take our plotter and we just hold it a little bit up on top of our course, and we just kind of hold it there, and we would just pick something that kind of around that 10 to 15 miles apart, and we can measure it. We would want to circle this. We'd measure it. Should be 13 nautical miles. If not, you can adjust it on your own sheet of paper if you're making this exact flight plan. And so 13 nautical miles. So we'll go back to our thing. We're going to call this power line, and we're going to say that leg is going to be 13 nautical miles. So what's 61 minus 13? I think it's 48, but I'm going to throw it in a calculator. 61 minus 13. Yep, 48. 48. I don't try to impress myself with doing simple math. All right, so that's going to do that one. So I did not write it up here because this is going to be our top of climb that we're going to figure out later on. I wrote it right here because this is going to be between, we'll just kind of talk about how we can deal with that later on. All right, so our next checkpoint. So we're looking down for some other ones. So we're looking, we can hold our thing, and this little road intersection right here is another 9 miles, I believe. So there's a little road intersection, there's a little circle, that's a little city. So that's going to be another 9 miles. So we'll do that. So we'd circle that checkpoint, and then we would write road intersection. And, we could click it on different lines so that it's not there. And we said it was going to be 9 miles. And so that means we would have 39 miles remaining. If I kind of put those in their little spots, it'll look pretty. And so that's that checkpoint. So now let's go find another one. So we're looking along our course right here, going along it. And then we have these fish hatcheries. We have this river and this road intersection, but I really like those fish hatcheries because it's really obvious. The negative of the road and the river is that you don't really know when you're going to cross it because you're not going to cross 90 degrees off of it. So if you're a little bit off course, you might be crossing right on top of the road, but it doesn't really work out. So something as obvious as your fish hatcheries is going to be a little bit better of an answer on a flight like this. All right, so if we do our plotter, we just hold it up, and we could either go all the way down there and do some math, or what I normally like to do is I like to make 0 back at my last checkpoint. So we put the 0 on our measuring on our plotter right there, and we'd measure to our fish hatchery. So we should get an answer of 14 or at least very close. 14. What's 39 minus 14? Should be 15. 25. I got to use a calculator. How am I messing this up? So 39 minus 14. I thought it was 25. That makes sense. 25 is going to be our answer. All right, and we forgot to write this right here, so I would have realized it whenever we got done. Fish hatch. We could write fish hatcheries. All right, so now we're looking for another checkpoint. So we kind of put the 0 of our plotter right there, and we're going along our route. We have this pipeline. We have this power line coming right here, and the dash one's going to be this pipeline, and we're going to kind of cross it. And it should be right to the left of our course. So let's use that as a checkpoint, and that should be another 12 miles if we measure it. So it's going to be a 12-mile leg, and we should have 13 miles remaining. And so we're gonna circle that checkpoint just like we circle all checkpoints, and we're gonna write power line, and then I'm gonna click below it and hopefully write pipeline. And so it's a power line pipeline combination. All right, so we only have 13 miles left, so we're just gonna say our last checkpoint is going to be the airport itself. It's going to be the airport of Selma, or we could write airport. Does not matter. We could measure the distance from there to there just to make sure that we didn't like screw up numbers left. So it's probably around 13. It's 12, 13. So we'll just kind of leave that as is. And then we could write 0 here, or we could leave it blank. I do not care what you do. All right, so we've got a bunch of checkpoints. So we're good there. Let's see what's next. Write down airport information. So we already wrote some down earlier, but now we're going to write some more. So we can either use the sectional chart, which we've kind of exhausted that for the most part. We can use the chart supplement, airnav.com to get this information. And so this is going to include all the frequencies, runway information, and if an airport does not have an ASOS, AWOS, or ATIS, so weather, then we're going to pick one nearby. Selma does have a weather, so we don't have to apply that, but maybe if we're going to Chilton County, we might want to look at somewhere like Shelby. And so we are going to get all that airport information. And so let me go up to the top of this document right here where I have a link to the online airport information right there. All right, so we're pulling up the AFD off the internet right here, and it should pop up in Chrome momentarily. All right, so while that lets it load, later on we're going to go to aviationweather.gov. Well, there it goes. All right, so supplement, it's going to let us search for stuff. So we're going to go KTCL, and I don't think you can put 2 airports at a time. Yeah, it won't let me space it. And we're going to go. And we're going to look at this. So if we had the book itself, then we could just look right at that. But I do not have a book right here. So let me reformat this, and let me zoom in on this one. All right, so here's the AFD for Tuscaloosa. So Tuscaloosa Regional Airport, TCL, KTCL, 3 northwest of the city, UTC -6, -5 daylight savings time, and it actually, we're -5 right now, but it's -6 after the weekend. Lat long, 170 feet field elevation, beacon. LRA, not sure what that stands for. I'd have to look up in the front in the index. This is saying indexing remarks, NOTAMs on file with Tuscaloosa. Runway 4 and 22, hard. Surface, 6,499, 150 feet wide, asphalt, grooved. Single wheel, 6,100 pounds to the max. Dual wheel, 8,700. 2 wheels in tandem, 1,688. So we can write some of this information down for our runway lengths and widths. So we said 4 and 22 was 6,499 by 150. Some other stuff there. Runway 4 has Mausers, a medium approach light landing system. Runway 4 has PAPIs, 4 PAPIs on the left side of the runway with a 3-degree glide path. Threshold crossing height with your eyes, 50 feet, trees. Runway 1, 2, and 30 are our other runways. Hard surface, 4,001 by 100 feet. So we can write that now. And so 1, 2, 30, 4,000 and, forgot to put a space. 4,001 by 100 feet. Asphalt, 1,500 pounds. And runway 1, 2, and there's trees. Runway 30, PAPI, 4, right side of the runway. Glide slope, 3 degrees. Threshold crossing height, 50 22.8 feet. Trees. Service is S4, so category, they have fuel, they have 100 low leaded, which we use. We don't have oxygen. Lighted, so it's lighted on the CTAF whenever the tower is closed. Airport remarks, this is whenever it's attended. We got to do something funky with this. Runway 12 and 30 is closed when tower is not in operation. We read 12 and 30 lighted as a visual runway. Birds and deer in vicinity of runways, and then there's some other stuff that we could read. Airport manager, ASOS frequency, we already got that written down, but there's a file number for it. CTAF 126.3, Unicom 122.95, we already got those written down. Tuscaloosa RCO 122.2. And so flight service station is what that's going to be, 122.2. And we're going to put that right there, and we'll talk about how we can figure that out another way. Crimson, it's a receive only, we don't care. Birmingham approach and departure, 120.15. So let's go approach and departure, 120.15. And one thing I like to do, 120.15. And one thing I like to do, especially for students, is I like to put like BHM or something like that beside it so they can remember who we're talking to. So we're going to talk to Birmingham there. Tower frequency 126.3. This is whenever they're in operation. Ground control 121.8. That might be something that we'd already known just off the top of head from operating outside of Tuscaloosa, but it's good to kind of write that down nonetheless. 121.8. Where were we? We're right here. Clearance delivery, we do not need that. Airspace class D surface during these times. Other times it's class G. Radios, avnates, NOTAMs on file with Aniston. This is a closed down VOR right now, actually. And this is a Tusky Loam. You do not need to worry about those for VFR. And this is kind of how the airport set up, but we're pretty familiar with Tuscaloosa. But it is helpful down at other airports. So that is the Tuscaloosa stuff. So now let's go and look up Selma stuff. So we've just got to go back, and we're just going to go KSEM. We're going to go, and we're going to pull the PDF, or we can look at it out of the thing. I'm going to scroll in here, and all right, Craig Field, KSEM, 4 miles southeast of the field, UTC -6, -5, lat long, 166 field elevation. We already got that. We put that in the wrong spot. Let's go 166, and now let's go 1200 pattern altitude. I'm sure that's what it is. Beacon, sometimes it'll say TPA and it'll give us a track pattern altitude, but it doesn't right here. NOTAMs on file with Aniston, 15 and 33, hard surface, 8,014 by 150 feet. It used to be a military airport is why it's so long. So 15 and 33 is going to be 8,014 by 150. Really nice long runway. Asphalt, concrete, runway 15, Pappies 4, left side of the runway, glide slope 3 degrees, threshold crossing height 50 feet, medium approach landing system, Pappies 4, 3 degree glide slope, threshold crossing height 56, trees, surface, activate Mausers on CTAF, monitor then, runway 15 and 33 markings, poor condition, airport manager, phone number, ASOS, we got that, so we got that, RCO 122.4, which we said earlier was unserviceable. We might not be able to pick it up per the NOTAM that we read. We wrote that on the backside. Montgomery approach on 124.0, and that's whenever they are in operation. If we did the subtraction on that, that's kind of daytime hours, and this is like middle of the night stuff. So we are not planning to fly there during the middle of the night. So let's put 124.0, and we're going to put MGM for Montgomery. And if you wanted to write it out, if you couldn't remember what MGM stood for, this whole entire sheet is made to put in however you want it. So we're good there. Atlanta Center, that's the other times, radio navigates. Montgomery VOR on 112.1. Montgomery, channel 58, lat long, 279 radial. So Selma is the 279 radial, 34.8 nautical miles to get to Selma. So if you hit Montgomery VOR, flew the 279 for 34.8 miles, you would get to Selma. And this is how this airport's set up. And there used to be 2 runways here, 2 parallel runways. But this runway is shut down. It's with these X's and why it's kind of grayed, just like a taxiway. And it's very obviously shut down. And then we have those Pappies left side, both left sides of the runway, and then there's that approach landing system, and then all the FBOs. If there's an FBO over there, it's going to be over there. So we've got that information. We could also write runways 4 and 22, and then 12 and 30 down here, just for our reference later on, and then 15 and 33. So we've got that information. So let's see what the next step is. We're going back down. Checkpoints, airport information. All right, so filling out the ICAO flight plan. So we would flip over to the back side of our Navlog, and we have a spot to fill out our flight plan. So I break down exactly what we do in all these spots. And so we would just fill that out exactly as I kind of talk about here. Just read that document yourself to kind of understand what all we're putting there. And so we'll go on to that. So that's all we can knock out, well before flight, because our checkpoints really don't matter. They're just distance. All our airport information is not going to change. So we're good there. All right. So now what do we have to do kind of shortly before our flight to finish this thing up? First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at METAR and TAF data for the airport. So we're going to go back to aviationweather.gov. We're going to search for the airport. We're going to make sure that we include to get the TAF data or to include to get the METAR if we're pulling TAF primarily. And we're going to write anything down that feels appropriate. So back side of the section, I've got that designed for students to write down appropriate information. So we're going back here. We're going back to aviationweather.gov. We're going to go METARs, and that link in the document would take you right there. We're going to go IDs. We're going to go KTCL space KSEM for Tuscaloosa and Selma. We're going to include the TAF. I'm going to get the raw just to read it to you. We could get the decoded, and it would be a little bit easier to read, and I'm going to pull the METAR data. All right, so let's see if I can zoom in on my webpage right here. All right, so Tuscaloosa, the 31st at 20:53 Zulu. And so how we could get from that, right now we'd subtract 5. So 20:53 would turn into 15:53. And right now it's 4:51. So it's about to issue a new METAR. Winds were 330 at 14, gusting 23. If we saw this, more than likely we would not make this flight. 330 at 14, gusting 23. You can write the wind information however you want. You can write winds 330 at 14, gusting 23. You can write it all out or not. I do not care. 10 statute miles visibility, overcast at 3,200. Temperature 06, dew point 0.01, altimeter 3024. So, that overcast layer, probably would not make this flight on a day like today, but overcast at 3,200. And then another thing that would be useful would be altimeter setting. I just like writing it down. So 3024 is going to be altimeter setting. If this overcast layer is 5,500, yeah, we could make this flight, and we'd have to bump down our cruising altitude. But that's going to be the METAR. The remarks, I do not care if you know what the remarks afterwards mean. Tuscaloosa, this is the TAF. KTCL 311 on the 31st at 17:36 Zulu is whenever this was issued, so a couple of hours ago. 310 at it's valid on the 31st from 1800 Zulu to the 1st at 1800 Zulu. The wind's 310 at 15, gusting 25. 6 statute miles visibility greater than is what the P stands for. Broken at 2,000 feet, overcast at 3,000 feet. And then starting on the 31st at 2100 Zulu, 320, 12, gusting 20, 6 statute miles visibility, scattered 5,000. So it seems like the ceiling's lifting, but the winds are staying pretty bad. And then on the 1st at 0100, so it'd actually be tonight on the 31st at 350 at 8 knots, greater than 6 statute miles visibility, sky is going to be clear. We would write anything that would be appropriate for that time period. And so let's say we were going to make the flight, we were going to make the flight here in a little bit. So we were going to make the flight after 2100 Zulu. And if that was going to be the case, then, we could write, till 8 CDT, which is going to stand for 8 local Central Daylight Savings Time. The winds are going to be 320, 12, gusting 20. And then it's supposed to be scattered at 5,000, or we could go scattered 5,000 is what the weather's going to be. So these sections are just for you. Selma, 31st, 12, 2135 Zulu. Auto-generated 310 at 13 knots. I need some food. That's why I'm screwing this up. So we can write METAR. The winds are 310 at 13 knots. 10 statute miles visibility. Temperature 8, dew point 3, altimeter 3019. And we can go 30.19. And it's just nice in case you get there and you don't have an altimeter setting to have something to set it to. There is no TAF for Selma. So one thing we could do is we could look at airports around Selma. So we got Selma right here. Maybe Vaden Field has a TAF. Maybe Montgomery has a TAF. Montgomery would probably be the best bet to get our TAF data. So we could look that up. And I'm just going to show you how we can look at ForeFlight. We can just click on Montgomery right there. We're going to pull up the forecast for it. And so today till 2 p.m. So tonight until 8 o'clock, 310 at 14, gusting 22, overcast at 3,000 feet. And then 340 at 9, sky clear starting at 8, going till 1 p.m. tomorrow. So it looks like it's going to be a whole lot prettier every day. We could write anything that we thought was applicable. So, if we thought the winds, 310, 14, gusting 22 knots, and then we could say like overcast at 3,000 feet. So we're good for METARs and TAF. So let's see what the next step is. All right, write down winds aloft and temperatures. So we're going to go to aviationweather.gov once again. We're going to drop down the flight level using the tool on the left side. We're going to zoom in, pick the nearest station, probably going to be Birmingham, because we only have Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Mobile in the state of Alabama. Convert to our flight level. It's just flight level 30 would be flight level 3000. Alternately, we could use the raw text, which is versus the 2D interactive. I'll show you the 2D interactive, and then I'll show you the raw text, and you could read this to see how we'd work the difference between them. So we're going back to aviationweather.gov, that site that we were on. So we're hitting that. I'm going to see if I need to zoom out, and we could go. We didn't really have to go home. I'm going to reset this to there. We're going forecast. We're going to go winds and temps, or we could click the link in the Word document if you have access to that. And now we're just going to drop this flight level. Oh, it's already dropped down to me. It's already flight level 30. So we're good there. Normally it starts high, but I think I accessed this thing earlier and it kind of keeps your most recent one. So we're zooming in. I'm going to try to zoom in for you on the webpage as well. So we're zooming in Birmingham. We just click on the station, 340 at 23 knots. And there is no temperature there. So we're going to go up to our winds and temps on our nav log. So we're going to go 340. And we're going to say 23 knots. And technically, it's not really till the second checkpoint, but until we're actually at climb, but don't really care. There is no temperature there, so one thing we could do is we could assume a standard lapse rate, which is going to give us 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet. And so we would have to look back at what the temperature was at the surface of Tuscaloosa. I think it was 7 degrees Celsius. And so we're going up to 5,000. Oh, actually, we're going to 5,500. So actually, let's pop this thing up to flight level 60, and let's see what the winds are differently up there. So you just got to click away. All right, 320 at 34 knots. So let's adjust this. 320 at 34 knots, so a little bit stronger of a wind. And then we're going to be 2 degrees Celsius. So kind of explaining what I was explaining. So if we were going up to, let's say, 33,500, 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet, we're going to be 6.5 degrees colder. Sorry, 7 degrees colder. If it was 7 degrees Celsius at the surface, we could expect it to be about pretty much freezing at altitude, which would be concerning, if there's visible moisture, because we're going to possibly get icing in that situation. So we've got the winds and temps written down for us. If we wanted to get the raw form, what we could do is we could winds and temps data. And on your written test, you have to look at it like this. We're going to get the south central. I just know it off the top of my head that's how we have to look at it for Birmingham. And so this is kind of whenever it's there. This is whenever it's valid for. So Birmingham's kind of the top one. So Birmingham at 3,000 feet, 340 at 23 knots. So the first two is the direction. The last two are the speed. And then at 6,000 feet, 320 at 34 knots, 2 degrees Celsius, that exact information that we got. And at 9,000 feet, 310 at 44 knots, still 2 degrees Celsius. And if it's over 100, then they do something weird with it. Like this is an example of it being over 100. And then we have to do some math that I talk about right here. I think you subtract 100 and add 50 to the direction, but we wouldn't be flying, so you don't have to worry about that. And I talk how we can read that. So next, we're going to calculate our takeoff and landing distance, and we're going to write them down in the performance and nav log. So we would just have to figure out our pressure altitude for the day. That's kind of why it's nice to write down our altimeter setting whenever we're checking that METAR. And we would calculate that per how we'd calculate that. So we would then write it as our ground roll and our takeoff distance. So I'm just going to put some random stuff in there right there. Well, actually, I'll just put some numbers. So let's say our ground roll, I think an accurate ground roll for us is around, 600 maybe. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then let's say a takeoff to clear 50-foot obstacle, we're going to say, something like 1220. Let's say those are the numbers that we calculate. Now, a good rule of thumb is at least 50% greater than calculated is what we want to have runway available. And so, we got at a minimum 4,000 feet, 8,000 feet at Selma. So we have plenty of distance for takeoff here at Tuscaloosa because we're kind of, 4 times that almost. I guess probably 3.5 or so. So we are well above that 50% rule. So we have plenty of takeoff length available. Calculate time, fuel, and distance to climb. Once again, something we'd use on the performance chart. And so whenever we got that answer, we'd write in our nav log along our top of climb checkpoint. So the things that we're going to get from that is we're going to get a climb indicated airspeed that's close enough to our true airspeed. It's probably around 65 knots. So I'm just going to put 65 knots right there for our true airspeed, but we're basing this off of the information that we get out of the chart for time, fuel, distance to climb, looking at the chart out of the POH. And then we're going to figure out and then it tells us the distance for that. I think our distance is probably going to be around, if we're flying to 5,500, I'll actually calculate real quick and get back on the video. All right, I've got the chart in front of me now. My climb to airspeed, actually, whenever we get all the way up there, I forget we're flying in 172. So that number is, had added the 152. So 72 knots is going to be our true airspeed that we probably calculate at 5,500. It should take us about 11 minutes. So on our time, it should be about 11 minutes. Our fuel use should be 2.1 gallons, but we got to remember that we got to add on top of it. So it's actually going to be 3.2 because we got to add for taxi takeoff, for taxiing to the runway. And then our distance, it says it's going to take us 14 miles. So earlier I told you that we talk about how we could deal with this whenever we're in a situation where, where our top of climb and our next checkpoint is kind of different and they're about the same length. So we got that figured out for right now, and we'll talk about more about that in a second. So let's see our next step. So time, fuel, distance, climb, we got that stuff written out for us. So calculate our cruise performance. We would do that, and we're going to write that on our nav log starting with our first leg at cruise. So the type of information that we're going to figure out from that is going to be our true airspeed. So I think around 109 is probably pretty accurate at that altitude. So 109 true. And then we're going to be we'll figure out the rest of that stuff later on. But let's say our gallons per hour for burning is going to be 7.2. So I like to put I put that up there just so we could have our cruise gallons per hour. So we've got that information filled out for us. So now we can use an E6B to calculate our wind correction angle, our other courses, and our ground speed. So we're going to go to e6bx.com and use the heading ground speed and wind correction angle calculator. And then this is just a bunch of how we can figure out all this stuff in these sections right here. So we're going to e6bx.com right here. I'm going to zoom in so you can have it. All right. Our course, we figured it out earlier. It's going to be 150. Our true airspeed, we're just going to do our true airspeed for our cruise because we're going to be cruising most of the way. We're not going to be climbing for nearly as long as we're going to be cruising. Our wind direction we figured out was 320 at 34 knots. So 320 at 34 knots. Wind correction angle is going to be +3. That's going to result in a heading of 153. Our ground speed is going to be 142. So we got a massive tailwind. So our wind correction angle is going to be +3, or we could just say 3. We could understand. And then that's going to result in a true heading of 153. We figure out our magnetic heading by taking our true heading and adding our east and west variation that we had already figured out from that isogonic line. And so we're going 156. And then we have no deviation in that aircraft for magnetic, so we're just going to put a 0 right there. And then our compass heading is going to be that 156 because our compass heading is our magnetic heading plus or minus deviation. So compass heading of 156, and we'll just assume that for all the way. Ground speed, our ground speed is going to be 142 whenever we're at cruise. So that's why we're putting in this second section because we're going to be at cruise. Our ground speed of our climb is going to kind of ever be increasing away from our indicated because as we climb, we get more and more of a tailwind on a day like today. So we're just going to leave that blank on this one right here. And now let's see what's next. So what's going to be next is, and we could use an old E6B, and there's a video. I just found some guys on YouTube, and I have a link there. Calculate timing using E6B. We can go to the E6B, flight time, distance, ground speed. We're going to write leg time over total time, and we could do it with an old E6B. So we're just going to scroll down a little bit. We're looking for all right, right here. Flight time and distance based on ground speed. So our first checkpoint we're going to kind of be climbing for the whole entire time because we have 14 miles to our top of climb, and our first physical checkpoint is actually 13 miles from Tuscaloosa. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to delete the distance out of there, and one way I could kind of annotate that is I could just draw a line through there, and we're just going to kind of say that we're going to be climbing all the way from Tuscaloosa to our power line. It's going to be around 13 miles and whatnot. And so we're going to do a similar deal for our, and so as far as our timing as well, we're going to kind of get there, 11 minutes. And so this can be one of those weird ones where we'll have kind of been cruising 11 minutes. And the only reason why we make a top of climb different than our first checkpoint is because a fuel burn is going to be massively different in a climb. So it's just one of those things that whenever we plan ahead, it just makes it a little bit tougher. So one thing we could do is we could just erase that, and since they're about the same point, and we'll just act like we wrote them on the same line. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to draw a line through there, and we'll have kind of been 11 minutes by the time we get both top of climb and our power line. And so now we can figure out the rest of our timing. So our next one, we're going to be a 9-mile leg. And if we wanted to as well, we could say we'll have been in the air for a total of 11 minutes as well by the time we get to our power line. So we've leveled off and we're at our power lines kind of at that same time. 9-mile leg, 142 is our ground speed. 3.8, let's just call it 4. I kind of round up and then round down occasionally. I just kind of mix it up. So our legs, so between the power line and the road intersection, it's going to take us 4 minutes. And we'll have been already in the air for 11 minutes before then, so we'll be 16 minutes total en route so far. Next one, between the road intersection and the fish hatchery, we're going to have 14 nautical miles, so we plug that into our calculator over here. We're going to be 6 minutes. And so we're going to go 6 minutes, so we'll have been in the air for a total of 6 plus 16, which is going to be 22. Between the fish hatcheries and the power line, it's going to be 12 nautical miles. We can do that, and let's round down this time. All right, let's go 5 on this one. So 5 plus 22, we're going to be in the air for a total of 27 minutes now. And then it will have 13 miles between the pipeline and Selma. So we have 13 miles. Will be 5.5. And so let's go 5.5. 5.5 plus our 27, what's going to be 32.5. And so we're going to kind of cruise for 33 minutes. I always round down whenever I'm doing these total things down here. So we've got all of it. So we've got all our distance leg over remaining, and then our time is leg over total time en route. And so we've got that figured out for us. So next step is going to be calculate our fuel burn. We're going to once again use E6B. Flight fuel consumption for flight time calculator. We're going to write leg burned over total burned. And we've already figured it out for our climb. We're going to burn 3.2 climbing up to 5,500 feet, which is going to be at the same time that we kind of get to the power line and our top of climb. We're kind of combining those. And now we just got to figure it out for our cruise legs. And we could do it with an old school E6B as well. So for this case, we're going to be flying for a total of 33 minutes, but we're going to spend 11 minutes of that climbing. So we're only cruising for 22 minutes. And so we're only concerned about our fuel burn right now over a 22-minute span. So how I like to show this is I like to combine all my legs, just kind of, this is how I combine all legs all the time. I just draw a line to kind of combine all the legs right there. So we're going to burn 3.2 in our climb, and then the rest of them we're combining as one leg. So we said we're going to cruise for 22 minutes, burning 7.2 gallons per hour. How we figured that out was based on our charts out of our pilot operating handbook. It tells us we're going to burn 2.64. So let's say 2.6, and so we're going to write that. Let me 2.64. Let's go 2.7. Let's be a little bit safe. And we're going to put that right there. And so we're going to burn 2.7 on that whole entire leg right there. And so for our total, we'll have burned 2.7 plus 3.2. So we'll have burned, 5.9 if my math checks out. So we're going to burn 5.9 gallons so far, and I'm just having to type this up there and sliding it down just because my thing's screwing up. And that's the problem with typing it on these things. Shoot. Let's go undo. All right, so there's 5.9, and so how much fuel are we going to burn? Like I said, I like to round up, and so we'll have burned 6 gallons, and so we're putting 6 gallons on our total fuel burned. And so we can kind of fill out this section now as well. We could have filled it out earlier. And so our starting fuel, if we're 38 usable gallons, we're going to put 38, and we're going to put that in our starting fuel. Our landing fuel is our starting fuel minus how much fuel we're going to burn. So we're going to have 32 gallons remaining after we burn 6 gallons cruising. And so we put that right there. So we've got our flight time and whatnot. So now we calculate our landing weight and balance for landing, and we would write that information right there. So maybe we're, 2,050 pounds landing. And let's say, we put a check mark for checking our moment. I'm just going to write check in this case, since I'm on a computer. Ground roll, let's say our ground roll is, 700 feet, and our distance to clear 50-foot obstacle is, 1,300 feet. Whatever we would figure out from these, whatever we would figure out from those charts. I'm just not doing it right now. So we would figure out next our intended landing, runway, and traffic pattern entry. So in this case, our runway options are 1.5 and 3.3. And so how I like to do it is I like to draw a runway, your course, and how do you plan to enter it in the notes section of our nav log. So we'll write it right up here in the notes section. And then remember, we want to pick the runway closest to wind direction, since winds are from and runways are to. And I like for students to always enter on the downwind leg, even if we're lined up on a straight and final. I still want you to enter on the downwind leg. So in this case, I'm going to try to draw this thing, and we'll see how well it works out. And so 1.5 and 3.3 would look something like this as a runway. And so if we were to put runway 1.5 is going to be which end? It's going to be the top end. So I'm going to put 3.3 down here, and 1.5 I'm going to put up here at the top, just to kind of help it. All right, so we're 1.5 and 3.3 are our runways, and we said we were coming in from 1.50. So like I said, I don't care if we're coming lined up on right on final. I want to steal with another way. So if we're actually lined right up on final, and this is why using a computer is very hard for this, we're going to kind of be coming straight in like this, and it's easier to draw it on a sheet of paper. So we're kind of coming straight in, and what we figure out the winds were? The winds are going to be 320, 12, gusting 20. And so 320, so the winds are going to kind of be coming, going something like, they're going to be coming something like this on us, not that one. And so we're going to land on runway 3.3 right here. And so what we're going to do is, if we're going to enter this traffic pattern, what we do is we would just space off a little bit over here. So we would just kind of space off whenever we found the runway. We just space off to the west of the airport, and we just join the left downwind, and we would go and land on runway 3.3. It's easier to draw it whenever you're not using a computer, so kind of try to keep it inside the notes section right there. Or what we could do is we could kind of space off this way and cross over midfield and join the left downwind for that. Really does not matter. But that's what we do. So we've kind of figured that out. And so now we need to figure out a descent point. So if we're joining the downwind leg, pattern altitude is 1,200 feet. And so we need to pick a descent point. So how we can do it is we can calculate how much altitude do we need to lose. So we need to lose, we're coming out of 5,500 and we're going down to 1,200 feet. So we have to lose 4,300 feet, 4,300 feet. So the formula for that is we're trying to descend on a 3-degree glide path. So we take our altitude to lose and divide by 300. It's just the rule. And this is sometimes hard to do in our head if it's a number not divisible by 3. Like, I at least don't know if 4,300 is divisible by 3. In that case, we can round it up to one that is, or we can break it up by dividing 300. We can break it, the dividing by 300, into two steps, so dividing by 1,000 and multiplying by 3. So 45 is divisible by 3, I think. So if we just rounded it up to 4,500 and then divided by 300, it's 15. So we need to descend 15 nautical miles out. So we're going to say descend 15 nautical miles out to join left downwind 3.3. And I'll kind of slide that down so you can actually read it. So we're going to descend 15 nautical miles out to join the left downwind 3.3. You could write left downwind. I just do an LD and then for our runway. So that's what we're going to do. You know how we could alternately do that formula is we could take 4,300, divide by 1,000, or move the decimal place over 3 places. That does the exact same thing. We have 4.3. We multiplied that by 3, and that should be 12.9, which is 13. It's pretty close. Not a big difference. But that is definitely two ways, but if we're on the ground, we might as well use a calculator and divide by 300. So yeah, the exact answer for 4,300 divided by 300 would have been 14.3. So kind of right between our two, rounding up versus using the alternate method. All right, so we've got kind of all the information that we need for our flight as far as obstacles, runways, anything like that. We could use this section right here to write it whenever we're in the actual airplane. I'm getting the ATIS or ASOS. And now it's kind of time to get a weather briefing. So we're going to get a weather briefing online. And so all we need to fill out is the aircraft ID, flight rules, departure, airport, time, speed, level, route, and destination. And then we can get a standard briefing. And we're going to write down anything that applies. So we've kind of already gotten some of the weather information, but there might be kind of more. And you can also file your flight plan while we're on the website, or we can call 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF, file it, and get an abbreviated briefing. I would like you to do a weather briefing online. And then I don't care where you file it. I just want you to file it. And then I want you to get an abbreviated briefing on the phone, kind of no matter what. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to we're going to go to the flight service, which is 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF. I'm just going to log in right here. What was this thing? The chart user's guide is what this is. I just never opened it up while we're talking about it. And let my computer log in slowly. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go flight planning and briefing. And I already have seen some airplane information put in there, so it's not nearly as hard for me to get some of this as it would be for you. I'm just going to close out of these things so that maybe it runs quicker. All right, we got flight plan briefing. We got the airport identifier. We said we were going to go VFR flight rules. We said we needed to put the departure airport. We're going to go destination, KSEM. If we're going to do a round robin, we do KSEM, then KTCL. But I do not like doing round robins with weather briefings because it does a hard job of, let's say we're going to just start 30 minutes from now. And that does that for us. We're good. Cruising speed, and we're going to go altitude 055. I do not like doing it because it does not give me a very good, it doesn't give me as good of destination NOTAMs. It doesn't make it as easy to find. So I think there would be a little bit more likeliness that I would screw up and miss a NOTAM. So we're good there. And we're going to pull up a standard briefing now. So you don't have to fill out the whole entire flight plan, or you could file your flight plan first. But in this case, we're just going to pull up this. And let me make this big screen. All right, so first thing it's going to do is it's going to tell you if there's any TFRs. So there are no temporary flight restrictions for this briefing, and we kind of already saw that, but we're just using it as a backup. There is. Runway 15 and 33 is closed, and so we couldn't actually make this flight. And it only puts a little yellow dot if it's actually, something there. There's airment. It's bad weather day, so there's going to be airments. And so there's freezing level airments. There's turbulence low, turbulence high. And that's all the adverse conditions. Synopsis, here's kind of the surface analysis right now. So there's that cold front moving through. There's rain behind it. It's really cold outside. Current weather. So we should have kind of already gotten the current weather. But here's kind of the METAR for Tuscaloosa. So it's VFR conditions kind of lower down Alabama. There's in Vadenville and Prattville. It's going to be marginal VFR. It's unknown at Selma because I don't think it reports sky condition. And it kind of gives us a little dot of what it looks like. So it looks clear behind us, kind of to the north. And that's probably clearing up later tonight as we saw those TAFs earlier on. Cloud cover charts. This is very nice because it kind of tells us how thick these clouds might be. And once again, it kind of looks like it's kind of sky clear on the back end. So as this thing kind of pushes through, it's getting clearer on the back side of it. Visibility, surface winds, precipitation, just kind of shows us that, it's not raining anymore. It's still raining on the East Coast and kind of where those winds are coming from or where it's supposed to be. Terminal forecast out of Tuscaloosa and along our route, winds aloft that we already looked at. It also kind of interpolates what those winds aloft might be for our actual altitude. They were going to file at, and it just kind of gives us along certain places. But we kind of already had that, so we don't care about that nearly as much. NOTAMs, these are all the departure NOTAMs. We just want to look carefully over those. Once again, even though we already looked at them whenever we planned it. But maybe it's been a day or two since we planned it, and maybe there's a pop-up TFR. More obstruction towers that don't really care about. We look at en route NOTAMs, FDC NOTAMs, international. And those aren't going to apply nearly as much. It's kind of better just to hear the briefer on the phone give you those. Make sure you're good there. Flow controls does not matter. Miscellaneous. I think this will be some convective outlooks. So there's convective outlooks for later on. So kind of on the East Coast, it looks pretty bad. If we look another day in the future, it's just down in South Florida. And then on the third day, it does not show us any convective outlooks. The site never does. All right. So that is our weather briefing. So the last step we would have to do is we would just have to file our flight plan. We could, file it on this site after we fill out the rest of this information that's applicable. And I think we just have a couple more steps left to go from here, or we could call 1-800 weather briefing and file it that way. So by the end, we should know if it's safe to make the flight, because we just looked at our weather and we just got a briefing from the weather briefer kind of telling us what the weather is, and we make that no-go decision ourselves. The airports that we're going to, are there any NOTAMs TFRs? We should be aware of those. What their pattern altitude is, we should have it written right here. What runways we plan to use, we're kind of putting it up in this section right here, so I don't even have to ask you that question. What the runway lengths are, we got them written right there. How we plan to enter the traffic pattern, shown up there. All their frequencies. When do we plan to contact them? That's kind of something we don't necessarily have to written, but we probably want to talk to them 10 miles out, 5 miles out, stuff like that. When do we plan on filing a flight plan? Hopefully you've already filed it. Who do we open and close it with? Flight service station. And then do we plan to get flight following? Who we're going to talk to that? We talk to departure and approach for those. And going back to for flight, because I remembered I told you that I was going to tell you how to figure out the flight service station. So there's 2 different flight service stations frequencies near us. I guess 3. You can always guess 122.2 is going to work because that is the standard, or we can look for things called RCO, which stands for Remote Communication Outlet. There's one at Selma, 122.4, and then there's one at Tuscaloosa, which is going to be right here, and that's going to be the Tuscaloosa RCO. Once again, Anniston radio. Or we can look on top of VOR. So there is no on top of Brookwood. If we go down here to Montgomery, there's a pretty good example on the Montgomery VOR. Load. And so Montgomery VOR 122.1 receive only, 122.2, 122.55, and this is military, and it's Anniston as well. So VORs or RCOs are our 2 ways, or we could look in the AFD, and it generally, if there's an RCO nearby, it'll list us. Otherwise, we're just going to guess with 122.2. Any other questions? If there's any other questions, you can ask me or refer to that document that might have a little bit better of an explanation or a more updated explanation. So long.